Okay, thanks, Elena, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to start by offering a bit of context in relation to care leavers in Scotland and their journeys to adulthood. Like many other countries, care leavers in Scotland often face an accelerated and abrupt transition to adulthood. They leave care at too young an age. They often lack the ongoing supports that many of us would take for granted. They're particularly at risk of homelessness, and studies suggest they're more likely to experience housing instability and homelessness due to a range of vulnerabilities and their more limited economic and social resources. A pattern of post-care transience and movement isn't uncommon for care leavers, offering mirroring levels of instability experienced through earlier childhood and multiple care placements. They tend not to have the continuing source of emotional, social and financial support that most young people their age receive. They're often expected to manage multiple changes at the same time, leaving school, moving on from care placements, often moving neighbourhoods, and in doing so disrupting relationships and social networks. And this can exacerbate poor outcomes across a range of measures, not least housing and homelessness. Next slide, please. So despite having the most enabling legislative and policy framework, Scotland still has stubbornly the youngest age of leaving care in the UK at just over 17 years of age. So we want to contrast that with the average age of leaving home for most people in Scotland, which is around 26 years old and rising. So just taking the chronological age as a marker, then there's a significant difference, even without taking into account the issues which can impact on care experience young people, often well into adulthood and often lifelong. Care experienced young people are an inherently disenfranchised group, too often characterised by experiences of abuse, neglect, rejection, loss, educational interruption, family disruption and poverty. And along with unresolved childhood trauma, and remember, being in care, even when it's the correct course of action, is a trauma in itself. This can impact heavily on young people's emotional, psychological and social development. So leaving care too early without the proper levels of support, with all the pressures and responsibilities that come with instant adulthood, is damaging and further traumatising. Leaving care later matters because leaving care too young is at odds with normative, cultural and neurobiological development. Next slide, please. All care is preparation for adult life. We need to take a much longer view and see beyond the overly simplistic bureaucratic constructs of age-related triggers and thresholds. We're not alone in Scotland, as the quote here suggests. If we want to improve transitions and post-care outcomes, we need to improve the in-care experience. They're inextricably linked. However, creating safe, stable, move-on accommodation and resources are vital for the recovery and growth of our care experienced young people. And staff working in this area must provide understanding, empathy, hope, and also believe in a positive future for our young people. And that must include other corporate parents and those who are supporting and working alongside care experienced young adults. Next slide, please. Too often, leaving care is seen as an event rather than a process, with care leavers expected to undertake living on their own after a crash course in practical life skills. And being pushed out in this way has got very little to do with readiness to assume an adult lifestyle. Instant adulthood can be scary and damaging, and the risks of failure, in inverted commas, can be punitive, stigmatising, re-traumatising, and sometimes worse. So this isn't just about the skills, but also about the fundamental importance of emotional readiness and ongoing relational support. Next slide, please. It's more than simply about finding a roof. It's also about having the necessary life skills, the emotional resilience and the confidence to cope with more independent living, and having ongoing supports needed to sustain the move need to be also in place. So given what we know then, it begs the question as to why we remain so fixated on chronological triggers and thresholds when they're at odds with everything else that we know about young people's development, about the impact of childhood trauma, and about our increasing understanding of the notions of emerging adulthood. Our national guidance talks of our young people being encouraged, enabled, and empowered to remain in positive care settings until they're ready to move on, and when they do so, to do so in a graduated and extended way. Poorer outcomes are not inevitable, and so we really need to close the gap, the rhetoric, between policy and practice. Next slide, please. So generally, adolescence is being drawn out as young people stay in school longer. They've got more difficulty in entering the job market, earning a stable income that would enable them to move out on their own. On the other hand, they're establishing their physical maturity, their sexuality, becoming more sophisticated much earlier on. Their transitions to adult will become a lengthier and at times contradictory process that can make young people both children and grown-ups at the same time. Societally, this is a longer process than it was a few decades ago. This has led our young people to become less autonomous, less self-sufficient, and less independent than previous generations. Thank you. They now tend to live longer with their parents, who tend to help with ongoing practical and financial support. The bank of mum and dad covering their living expenses, for example, but also providing the ongoing emotional and relational support and security. So although the transition to adulthood for the general population has become longer, more complex and personalised, our care systems and the other public services that support them struggle to take these changes into account, remaining stuck with these overly simplistic, chronological and legislative triggers, which continue to accelerate young people from care to instant, in many cases, damaging versions of adulthood. Next slide, please. So too often our policies talk about preparation for independence or independent living. And I would ask us to think about, are any of us really truly independent? Do we not all rely on our family, our partners, our parents, children, colleagues, friends, neighbours, and our other social networks for support? And if these were unreliable or unavailable, how would we feel and who would we turn to? Our own Staying Put Scotland guidance explicitly states the notion of independence is perhaps better expressed as interdependence, more accurately reflecting the day-to-day reality of an extended range of healthy interpersonal relationships, social supports and networks. And this is reinforced across international research and academic writing, with an increasing recognition that the term independence is wholly inappropriate in the context of young people's transitions. To underline the point, young people's interpretation of being independent doesn't exclude receiving support. Rather, it's the avoidance of dependence, and that's a subtle but significant difference. Next slide, please. For most young people, parental support, however intermittent, carries on in their 20s, and young people in care also need this support. And whilst transitions aren't timed in a very precise way in the lives of many young people, timing can be really out of sync for care leavers, and this needs to be contrasted with the experiences of the general population, as this quote here from 2016 research shows. Positively delaying the age at which young people leave care is critical to closing the outcomes gap across a range of metrics, and that's particularly so in housing accommodation, and which is why staying put under continuing care arrangements, leaving care later, must be regarded as a primary prevention of homelessness and housing instability for our care experienced young people. And I would really want to draw your attention to the Improving Care Leavers Housing Pathway, published jointly by the Way Home Coalition, CELCIS and the Scottish Government in 2019, a range of recommendations and a lot of contextual information for how we begin to improve housing outcomes and pathways. Next slide, please. And so the context of COVID-19, the impact that COVID-19 has exacerbated and amplified the precariousness of many care leaver situations, exposing the structural disadvantage and discrimination that they face, impacting on their rights to services and their supports and provisions. For some young people, continuing care, for example, has become the default, with both young people and their care providers positively seeking to avoid the physical moving on of young people during this time. However, others who would have been illegally entitled to remain in positive care placements have been moved into post-care move-on accommodation, for example, due to carers or agencies' concerns about being in lockdown with young people for an extended period. And given the current challenges with often person-centred and face-to-face support, this has left many young people in very unsatisfactory situations, and the consequences of this are potentially catastrophic. So this is a multifaceted, complex area in which many rights issues for care leavers had been raised prior to COVID-19. The impact of the pandemic has added further layers of complexity and challenge, leaving more young people open to potential instability. Next slide, please. So my final slide, And just to wrap up, our care experienced young people really need a different response. To be trauma informed for our care weavers is to understand the ways in which their pre-care, their in-care and their post-care experiences may have impacted on them, and to apply that understanding to support their need and the provision of services that they accommodate their developmental needs into adulthood to promote healing, recovery and growth. Secure, safe and stable accommodation is an essential building block for success and achievement, and it's got a direct impact on emotional health and well-being, as well as supporting and enabling engagement in education and employment. And it's particularly vital for care weavers who've experienced instability, transience and uncertainty in their lives. Central to this is relationship-based practice and young people's ongoing sense of connection, belonging and felt security. This isn't just about flats and houses or bricks and mortar, as important as good quality accommodation is. A much greater appreciation of the often complex and challenging journey that care weavers have to make compared to the non-looked after peers must inform practice across all our relevant agencies. Thanks very much.